Hello, this is the final demo video for the Royal Flush group making Deckmate. My name is Duncan. I was the lead developer on the project and I worked on the main chess gameplay as well as the sound design and the art design.
Hi, I'm Madison Bird. I mostly worked on the opponent AI and the game logic.
Hi, I'm Ashton Harris. I worked mainly on the multiplayer mode and the logic for that, as well as the connection elements.
Hi, I'm Sakit Thanagai, and I focused on the inventory and store screens along with the dialog boxes throughout the game.
So here we'll talk a bit about the concept of the game. So first of all, how did the idea for the game come about? It actually started because many years ago I played a version of chess with my dad that was you drew the cards that told you what pieces to move, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a version that had more cards with different effects besides just what pieces you moved? And it just kind of snowballed from there into adding more ideas.
Yeah, so we initially had planned to have a wider range for multiplayer. We wanted it to be online at first, but we ended up scaling that back to sort of a local model, peer-to-peer connection-wise. We realized scope-wise it wasn't really feasible to have some sort of global connection system without setting up like this whole database for like account stuff and like ID connect for connection wise and maintaining that. We just decided to kind of scale that back to a more local base.
Because this is kind of a chess game where you have cards that have different effects on the board. We used to have this card called the scramble card that would just scramble all of the pieces randomly around the board, but we ended up removing it because it was a nightmare for the game logic.
We originally had trouble deciding the probability of drawing each card. At first, all cards had an equal chance of being pulled, but we changed it to where it's more weighted towards movement cards so that the game can actually advance.
So the key features of the game, the most fundamental idea is that there's three different types of cards you can pull. So the basic type of cards is the movement cards that are the basic chess movements that you all know, but there's also movement plus cards that take a little spin on the normal way that a piece moves. So like the pawn movement plus card lets it move forward one space or backward one space. So each piece has its own variant of that type of movement. There's also active cards that take up the most of the types of cards in the game. Those ones take effect immediately when you play them. And then there's also passive cards that don't take effect right away. You more so equip the card, and then when one of your pieces taken, the passive card activates then and has an effect.
So as for the actual gameplay itself, we've simplified it a bit by splitting it into a couple of different game modes. There is the normal mode, which is kind of what we just described, where it has a balance of, the movement cards, the active cards, the passive cards. But there's also, if you want to just play with specifically movement cards, there's a movement only mode, or there's a movement plus only mode, which focuses on the extended version of the movement cards. And then there's also an anything goes mode as well.
For the opponent AI, we also have difficulty levels. So there's an easy mode that plays less aggressively, a normal mode, and a hard mode that plays more aggressively.
So there's also a store and inventory system where players can use the money that they've won during matches to buy new skins like chess pieces and boards. And when you navigate to the inventory screen, you'll be able to select the cosmetics and apply them in game.
So now we're going to talk about the technology of the game and how we're actually making it.
So the main software we're using for the game is Game Maker. It's a 2D focused engine that is event driven. We also used Git to kind of when we compartmentalized the code into a bunch of different sections based on the feature, and so everyone was kind of working on their own little chunk of it, and then we used Git to combine it all into one repository project.
As for testing, when I needed to test an individual function, we would just call it somewhere, with a unit test in the code, comment it out when we don't need it. And if we wanted to do testing by simulating what an actual user might do, we would create an object that would, for example, simulate a click on a button just to make sure that it works.
Now we're going to move over to the actual game and showcase the actual features that we just talked about. So when you launch the game, this is the screen you'll initially be taken to. You can see we've got the logo here that says Deckmate, and then we also have all these buttons here that allow the player to navigate to the different sections of the game.
You also have the option from the corner to toggle full screen on and off, as well as the sound for the game if you want to.
So the main option that players will be using is the single player option. So when you click that, it takes you to this screen where you can set up the different configurations for the single player match, as far as stuff like the computer difficulty, how long each turn takes, the different game types like we described, and also whether the computer or the player moves first. And then once you've decided on all your settings, you'll just hit the start game button. Once you're here on the single player screen, you'll be able to see the chessboard on the left here, and then you'll be able to see both your hand and the opponent's hand on the right side here. So each turn, a person can play as many passive cards as they want. They can play one active card per turn, and they can play one movement card. Playing the movement card is what ends the turn. So I'm going to play this move pawn card here, and then I will move this pawn to this tile here. Then you could see the AI opponent made its move, which is logged right here, and you can also see that their card hand was updated to reflect how many cards they actually hold. So now I can choose to play this active card, which lets me rewind a piece. So I can rewind this piece that I moved on the previous turn, and now I can play this move knight card, which allows me to move the knight and end my turn.
So I spent most of my time working on this project programming the opponent AI, and there are a few design considerations I had to make that came up while I was creating it. One of them was that I limited the number of cards that the AI can play in one turn just to keep things from getting too confusing. As for the different difficulty levels, I implemented them by giving the AI a stronger incentive to move pieces to the center on harder difficulties, because in chess, controlling the center of the board is very important. And also, it plays more aggressively by having a greater incentive to capture enemy pieces.
This is one of our fail safes we have implemented. So as you can see in my hand here, I don't actually have any pieces available to move because all of their options are blocked off. So this failsafe here tells me that the only piece I am allowed to move this turn is a pawn. It'll randomly select one of the pieces that have a valid movement for the turn. So now I can select one of my pawns and move that, but I won't be able to play any cards from my hand if I have no valid movement cards. So as you can see, this card is now available for me to play when it wasn't on the previous turn.
So on any given turn, the AI will look at the cards it has in its hand. It'll make a choice of passive and active cards to play, but when it comes to movement, it'll look at all of its movement cards, compile a list of all the possible moves it can make, and assign a score to each one of those hypothetical moves. And then using an algorithm I've designed, it'll play what it thinks is the best move on that turn.
So the big feature of the game obviously is the different types of cards you can play. So as you can see here, I have some special cards in my hand. And if you're confused about any of the cards at any time, you can select the card, and as you can see on the side of the screen here underneath the board, it'll tell you about the name of the card and give you a description of what happens when you play the card. So just in case you're ever lost on what you might want to pick, you can just click the card, read the description, and see if you want to play it or not. So right now I can play this card that will be a passive card, go into the passive slot here, and then if I want I can play this card right here, and then it'll tell me here, select a piece to set your movements to. So I'm just going to select a pawn here, and now all of my cards have been updated to a pawn, so I can just move this pawn up here, for example. And now, as you can see here, something has happened, so let's check the log. The AI has played a card here that ends up removing cards from our hands, and now it is my turn again, so I have to move a piece here. But as you can see, there are multiple different types of cards that you can play that each have different effects, and that is the key to winning. Not just moving your pieces strategically, but also when you should play cards in which circumstances that may have special effects.
So in order to make the game more transparent, I implemented a game log at the top that tells you what moves and cards the AI has made.
So here we have set up an example of a situation where I can win. So I can play this card here and move my queen to capture the king. And then you get this little pop-up here that says, you win, congratulations. And then if you hit the play again button, it'll take you back to that single player screen where you can select the settings for each game, or you can hit this return to main menu button, which will take you back to this screen where you first launched the game.
So the next bit of the game to go over is the card encyclopedia. Going into here from the main menu, this serves as a comprehensive database for all the cards. We've separated them all into 3 categories as previously mentioned, and you can see that amongst the tabs here, which cycling through here will allow you to search by the type of card. Selecting any of the cards will put this little pop-up, which displays its name, as well as a quick little description of what it does. For example, with the passive cards, we have this one, which will trigger an explosion, which takes out a lot of the pieces in the area around a piece. This is the revenge card, which, as it describes, is also going to take down any piece that is attacking your piece. Movement cards are pretty straightforward. Most of these will just move the piece pictured on the card. We also have the Movement Plus cards, which give a extended movement options to that particular piece. For example, the Movement Plus for the Queen will allow it to move to any free space on the board, and the one for the King will allow it to go 1 extra space in the direction. For active cards, we have things like Revive, which will just revive the last piece that you have lost, or let's see, self-promotion, for example, will just, you can select any one of your pieces to promote instantly to whichever piece that you want.
So this is the store screen where players can use the money they've won during matches. The store is already populated with boards and pieces the player can choose from. Let's say if the player wants to buy a new chess piece, they can click on the piece and a pop-up will appear that shows the piece, the cost, and a button that says purchase. If the player has enough money to purchase the piece will be purchased and added to the inventory screen. If the player does not have enough money, the button will flash red and say not enough money. If we navigate to the inventory screen, we can see all the cosmetics the player has access to. As you can see here, there are already pieces on boards available for the player to choose from, as well as the recently purchased pieces. If the user wants to update their cosmetics, they can click on whichever board or piece style they want, and it will be updated in-game.
So the last major bit of this game to talk about will be the multiplayer section. So from the main menu, you'll just hit multiplayer to navigate to the multiplayer menu, which essentially is going to be much the same setup as the single player variant, except with the main difference being that you can now select whether this is going to be a game just on your network or across multiple different networks. I'm going to just play between 2 instances on my device, so I'll just leave this as yes for now. And of course, this will change the description that's being displayed for the particular game, but I'll just leave it as normal for now. If I try to join a game when there isn't one existing on this network, it'll just won't find any, and it'll let us know. As I'll host a game here. The game does not start, of course. We have 1 player connected. If I go to my other instance here, I can join said game. Now it detects that there are 2 players connected. We are not the host, and the timer is now started since both players are connected. Going back to the other instance, we can see it is now my turn, so I will just make a move. The interface is essentially the same as single player. So I'll play King's Pawn here. Turn ends. It is now the other player's turn, the non-host. So I can see the last move was reflected there. So I guess I'll just make another move here. Turn ends. Back to the host. My turn again. You can see the move is reflected. So on and so forth until the end of the game. Let's say hypothetically, though, that maybe this player's not a computer, so maybe they'll just leave early or something like that. In that scenario, if I close the instance, for the player that's still in the game, it'll detect that the connection is lost. And instead of crashing, it'll just detect that, let you know, and gracefully return you to the menu. Say you wanted to play a game that was not local, you could just switch that to no, and when you try to join a game, it'll let you first enter the IP of the game that you want to join, and then you can hit start game, but that's essentially it to multiplayer.
Thank you for watching our presentation and demo video. We hope this helped you learn everything you need to know about our project.